What's good, everybody? I'm Jędrek, he's Sodek, and today we are here for our bi-quarterly modern metagame update on the very last day of February 2023. Let's go! Alrighty, so yet another 6 weeks came and went, and everything happened so fast. I felt like it was yesterday when we recorded the last one, and Sodek even messaged me today. What are we recording today? And I was like, dude, it's the metagame update. It's been 6 weeks or so since the last one, and Sodek was like, what the hell? 6 weeks just came so fast.
Yeah, like also there were so many Magic events to play or to watch that I didn't expect time to go that fast.
That's true.
That's
very, very true. And I will say honestly that in those last 6 weeks, I haven't been playing that much Modern, personally. There was a somewhat large Pioneer tournament in Poland that I played, and Sodek was snowboarding. There was a PT in Pioneer, of course, that we were both very keenly watching.
Yes.
There is upcoming RC in Standard, and we both have been playing some Standard with Sodek. But it's good to come here and talk about Modern for unspecified amount of time. Because, well, it's our format. It's the format that we love. And although there are some cool decks in other formats that I can still play broken cards like Consider, it's not the same as Modern.
That broken level of Consider somewhat here.
Consider is so broken, dude.
Here is Deathrite Shaman. Here is Consider. Take notes.
Okay, we can agree on that. So
I also
I guess before we start actually talking about stuff, like you will notice that we have less decks than we had before, because first of all, the list of decks that we are talking about on like bi-monthly basis has been growing really, really fast into something that I don't think is feasible to cover in one video, especially if we want to actually talk about those decks. And the B tier has been growing just a bit too much for our taste. So first we kinda put a like flat 2% metagame share threshold. You have to pass to be included, and then also we kinda broke down B tier to two different tiers like B and C, just because like usually in our updates the A tier is pretty definitively better, or like had better results than B tier, and then B tier is like a bunch of decks that are sort of flat, but there are so many of them, and C tier are basically decks that aren't being played that much. That mostly are there because they won, or they shown it themselves just enough to clear the threshold you need, but because of their like smaller presence, their score was lower, and therefore they were in C. So basically, B and C are both tiers that you probably are distinguishing mostly because of how popular those decks are in recent weeks, rather than how well they both did, or both of those tiers, or every deck in both of those tiers. And now we just kind of are making it a bit flatter, so we don't have like 20 something decks. We have 16 decks today, which is still a lot, and Modern is still a format that's incredibly vast. And if a deck that you like isn't on this list, it doesn't mean that it's garbage and unplayable, even though we love ridiculing Merfolk. It's a deck that we don't have on the list today, but it's still a decent deck to some extent. So
how about Dredge? What do you think about Dredge? Because I heard about one guy who keeps making good results on MTGO, but somehow Dredge isn't included here.
Okay, basically, I am not including any decks that can't win against Strict Proctor with Mutagenic Growth on our list. Because
Two mutagenic growth.
two Mutagenic Growths, whatever. If you don't know what we are talking about, you can go to Sodek's Twitter. There is a very funny screen of Sodek losing miserably to Blue-Eyed Spirits with Mutagenic Growth there.
And fun fact, my opponent was like enjoying this time very much, and I was like, I was tilting, and he joined my tilt, so I was tilting even more. So he was constantly laughing, and it was, like laughing, maybe not in a bad way, but like having
Like
a good
smirking.
time, I would say.
Yeah. Like
something
I
this.
do know the person who Sodek lost to, and they are not the type of person who just laugh at you like maliciously, I
like,
would say.
It was.
He's a very positive guy. So
Yeah, I want to say hello to Shulbor here.
yeah, hello Shulbor.
Yeah, that match,
you're
that
watching
match
this.
was memorable at least.
Oh yeah, so yeah, no dredge, no spirits to be fair either. So yeah, you wanted to say something beforehand before we start. What was that?
I just wanted to say that if like basically what you said, like there are still a lot of viable choices for certain meta games. And if you're like it's not on the list but you know it and you feel that it's a good choice, just go for it and do your thing.
Yeah.
And the rest is or will be presented here. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So before we start, we actually have two inclusions into the category that we have kind of omitted recently, which is decks to watch. The first one is Shining Shoal Humans. With for the lack of better name, that's how I called it in our scraper, or in our like tier list, and I think that this is a deck that kinda attacks the metagame or the format in general, or it's either asking good questions or answering the questions that the format is asking in a right way. And that's why, despite having incredibly low power level on average, those cards just stink for the most part. But because of how you can just steal games with Shining Shoal, or sometimes Chancellor of the Annex will completely blow out your opponent because they are banking on, I don't know, they kept one lander with Ragavan, or one lander with Ether Vial, or with Mana Dork, or something. They really bank on making impactful turn one play, and now they can't because of Chancellor of the Annex. And this deck has very good ways of utilizing that Chancellor later on in the game, because it has Solitude, it has Shining Shoal, which for those of you who might not recognize this card, because why would you? It's an instant from Betrayers of Kamigawa. It costs X and double white. It has an alternative casting cost of exiling a white card with CMC X from your hand. And then it has an effect of you prevent X damage that will be dealt to you and permanents you control, or target permanent or you.
Would deal to you or a creature you control.
Or a creature you control, okay? And then it deals that damage to another target, right?
Target creature or play instead. Like there was the times before
Planeswalkers. Yeah, so okay. So you basically redirect damage to your opponents or their creatures.
Yeah. What's really important in this situation, like this whole idea is built in a way to maximize the damage that can be dealt from Shining Shoal, because you have like surprisingly high CMC. There's Chancellor, like you said. There's Emeria Skull in form of a land that has 7 CMC, and there's of course Solitude. So it's relatively easy to just like, it's the best answer to Fury ever, I would say.
It's very like, it's not that great against Fury because you can only prevent damage from one creature. So if Fury kills 3 of your creatures, you can only prevent 1 of them, right?
Source of your choice would deal.
Oh, so we are preventing from one source, not from one target, right?
Source of your choice will deal to you or a creature you control.
Okay, yeah, that works. Yes. I just don't have the card right before my eyes because of all the other stuff I had to have on my screen. But yeah, that makes sense. If it's worded that way, then it works.
Yeah, and what I really like in this deck is how it keep ups with like there's something unfair you have to do in modern to keep up. Like typical white hate bears were just not good enough because like the mana curve was too high. Like your impactful cards were too high CMC to compete with, you know, value decks with Unholy Hit, with Yavmod, with Creativity, etc. So adding this angle that attacks the opponent without using your mana is exactly what this white decks needs actually. So
Yeah.
I'm pretty excited that this type of, you know, rebuild taxes deck somehow found a way, and the deck refuses to play Ether Vial, which is super cool. And
Yeah, it's more of a humans deck, really, than Dev Taxes. It's just an aggro deck. More than anything else. You are playing Adeline, you are playing Talia's Lieutenant. It's just an aggro deck. And I think that the more I think about it, the more I like Chancellor of the Annex. It's really a brilliant addition. Because decks like that always had problems dealing with early Ragavan. And Chancellor of the Annex is basically 0 mana answer to turn 1 Ragavan. Because this deck will provide you with a blocker, usually early on, and if not on turn 1, then on turn 2, definitely. So the fact that you can, you can delay this Ragavan for 1 turn is usually good enough. And it's not like they can pass on 1 and then dash Ragavan on 2 if they didn't play anything on 1. They can just hardcast Ragavan on 2 and pay for it. Or if they have a spare Mishra's Bubble Show, they will get their bubble countered. But Chancellor is just a very smart idea, in my opinion. And I like how it's reinforced in the sideboard. You have those like Barentons. I don't remember if this deck usually have Sanctifier and Vec, but it definitely has Barentons.
4 copies.
4 copies in the sideboard. Yeah, so you are, for a deck with without much removal, you are very good at dealing with early Ragavan, or at least like minimizing its impact, which is super impressive for a tribal deck, in my opinion. Plus, as you said, like this angle of, I don't know, instead of dying to Murktide Regent, you are killing your opponent with Murktide Regent due to Shining Shoal, or something similar to that. Yeah, I just think that this deck, and it's also a protection for your creatures for 0 mana. Like if you go like turn 1 creature, turn 2 creature, turn 3 Adeline, and your opponent goes, okay, Unholy Hit on Adeline, and you go, no, Shining Shoal, you are dead now, because it's like 6 damage from Unholy Hit, plus whatever your board is, which is like at the very least, you will attack for like 10 total with the Shining Shoal damage. So like...
Yeah, or you just kill a blocker, like you kill Ledger Shatter or even...
Oh,
DFC,
exactly, yeah, of course.
And that's
yeah.
Like, in my opinion, like it's super cool that someone actually wanted to find a free spell that's actually good. Like, because like in the history of Modern, we saw a few examples of making really weird free spells good. For instance, it was Nourishing Shoal in combo decks with Griselbrand, for example. Like this card, like at first glance it looked extremely bad, because like who gives a fuck about giving lives, and somehow it works that really great. And this is the great example of this like great reward for finding something that just
and
it's free and narrow, but also very out of the box, so it's really hard to
and it also benefited very much, and it's a very smart move in regards of what removal is popular in Modern. So before MH2, I think like using Lightning Bolt as removal was at the all-time low. Like some decks played them, of course, but mostly they were trying to like burn you, like prowess or whatever. There was a lot of lava darts that Shining Shoal sucks against, or a lot of pushes and like decays and trophies and whatnot, and Skyclave apparitions. So now you have Unholy Heat, which is the most played removal spell alongside Lightning Bolt. Like those two are two mostly played spells. You have Fury, which is great. You even have the 8 Blast deck that usually has been or recently has been gaining some popularity, and they are playing both Galvanic Blast and Shrapnel Blast. And getting Shrapnel Blast Shoaled is also very painful for the Blast pilot. So yeah, I think that this deck is very smart right now. Like its positioning is very smart, and shout out to Hank the OBs for coming up with it. And yep, I'm truly impressed, and I don't think I've been impressed with the like novelty of a deck in Modern for quite the way I am right now for quite some time. This deck is just so much than the sum of its parts, basically, and it's just so smart, I think. So the other card, like we said, decks to watch, but it's more than a decks to watch. It's a card to watch in different decks that are kind of similar, but also a bit different. And the card is Atraxa Grand Unifier. So as you may remember from our Firexa video, we kind of forgot to talk about it. And
That's about 7 drops, yeah.
Yeah, and Atraxa is it's really messed up. Like, it's the best thing you can cheat into play via like various Goryo's Vengeance or other reanimation effects like Footsteps of Goryo or Sneak Attack. I saw that JPA won the Legacy Challenge with Sneak and Show on the weekend, featuring 2 Atraxas.
They won?
Nice. Definitely on top 8. I think he won. And JPA is a player who used to play a lot of Sneak and Show, but recently switched to decks like Delver and stuff because Sneak and Show was just too bad to compete. But maybe with Atraxa is a bit better now. Who knows? Atraxa is a large monster that can be pitched to Force of Will, which is a very, very big deal. Unlike Griselbrand or Emrakul.
There are numerous things that goes right, because in terms of legacy, Griselbrand had to pay 7 life to gain life, and with White Initiative around, sometimes you just didn't have this resource to work with.
Yeah, I think so. The biggest downside of Atraxa is that it can be pyroblasted on the board, which is
in Legacy, yes.
Yeah, in Legacy,
not so much.
Yes. So basically, in Modern, some people have been using Atraxa as a like curve topper for Elementals deck. You just play 1 Atraxa to fetch with Eladamri's Call. That's very sus, and I don't think it's super good. But more successful lists have been experimenting with reanimating Atraxa with mostly Goryo's Vengeance.
I feel that this deck is like still in development. Like, sure, Susurrus MTG, I want to say hello to Susurrus, I'm a big fan, made a deck that's a Goryo's Vengeance strategy with Emrakul, with Atraxa, with the Asmo food package as well, because if you are playing the Underworld Cookbook and Urza Saga, like these pieces works together kind of nicely, so it's here. Adding Atraxa instead of Griselbrand that was previously played means that it's easier to play a mid-game Atraxa that finds another Goryo's Vengeance, that reanimates Emrakul and wins the game on the spot. It also lets you play Giganta, which is, like, playing Companion is better than not playing Companion. There are some things. The deck also plays Profane Tutor, the card that when I was experimenting with the deck, I kind of missed, and I'm a bit jealous right now. And there's a small Profane Tutor board. Like, there's 1 Bone Shards, 1 Brainstone to put Emrakuls back to the deck and shuffle them back. So there's some things to do. Is it the final form of the super archetype? Let's say that. Probably no. And I feel that you can like I'm pretty sure that there's something better than Collective Brutality. I don't feel that.
Yeah, I also think that you kind of. I think you kind of pigeonholed on the Susurrus's list, and kind of omitted every other reanimator list that people have been trying and had success with as well. I know that Susurrus 10 out the challenge, but there was
10-0.
but there was another reanimator list that top-8 this weekend, I think. And like most lists, like of course, this food approach is a bit different than the traditional reanimator list, but the more traditional lists of reanimator that kind of lacked something, I think got it in Atraxa. Like the combination of Goryo, Vengeance, and Ephemerate, especially with Atraxa, is very powerful.
Yes.
So yeah, like if your turn 3 is Goryo's Vengeance and Atraxa, you have 4 Ephemerates in your deck, and you have 10 looks for it. And you might have had one before. Like, it's very, very, very likely. Let's give me a second and I will tell you how likely is it.
OMG, Andrek.
Yeah, I think we owe it to our our viewers. So yeah, if you have 59 cards in your deck, and you have 4 Ephemerates, and you look at 10, and then you drew, like, you have to find one in 20 cards, let's say. I think it's fine. 7 plus 10 plus you have to discard Atraxa in some way, like with Faithful Mending or something, so you are looking at cards. So you have... Come on. Don't fail me now. No! Math has failed me. Math has failed me, which never happened before. And the hyper... Oh, it's 81%. 81% to hit, which is a lot.
Assuming you play 4 Ephemerates, because, you know...
Yeah, I think you just play 4 Ephemerates, because those decks also play Grief and Solitude. Because you can do so, because you have so many cards to pitch. Because Atraxa pitches to everything. You can play Grief, you can play Solitude, you can play Force of Negation if you want even. So I do think that those shells, like, my problem with the previous versions of Esper Reanimator, the ones with like Persist and Archon, was that this deck just wasn't very explosive. And the Atraxa version just kills so much faster. You can attack on free, you can attack out of nowhere. You can reanimate at instant speed, which is so good against Endurance, against many different forms of Grave Hate. You can just discard Atraxa and let it sit in your graveyard until you, I don't know, you draw Grief to get their Endurance. Or if they Endurance EOT to put some clock on you, you just respond with your combo. It's very impressive in my opinion compared to the previous versions of Reanimator. I'm not saying that Reanimator is a great deck or anything, but I think it's a very significant upgrade over old Reanimator decks, and I am quite interested in seeing how they evolve from this point, basically. All right, moving to the actual A tier.
Yes.
Okay, so in the A tier, as always, on the verge of the S tier, we have Murktide, and then following Murktide, we have 4 more decks in A tier: Creativity, Hammer, Red Black Scam, and Yawgmoth. So after playing different versions of Blue-Red in the last, what is it, like 3 months now? Maybe a bit less than 3 months. I was very impressed with Breach decks. And I still think that Underworld Breach is messed up. But at the same time, I think that Murktide Regent as a card is very important because of how many decks are bad against an 8/8, and even more so how important having an 8/8 is in Blue-Red Mirrors. I think you are quite unfavored without any Murktides in your deck if you're playing against other Murktide decks or other Blue-Red decks. And with Murktide being the most popular deck in the format, I don't think you can afford to be bad or to lose so many percentage points there. I've had some conversation with people on our Discord about Murktide, and I thought about it a bit lately, and came to a conclusion because it's been a trend with Merktide that some people have been playing Blood Moons in the main deck again, which makes sense with the rise of like 4-color decks. And there was argument from. Why are you laughing?
Yeah, I'm not laughing. Like I'm questioning a bit the rise of 4-color decks. If we count creativity too, sure.
There was a lot of different 4-color decks doing well recently, and I saw so many of them on Modo. Even if they are not doing terribly well, you are getting paired against a lot of them recently. That's what I. It's very anecdotal from my own point of view, of course, but I saw so many different. For example, the Mana Traders event that happened this week. There was like 200 something people, and Elementals as a whole was the second most popular archetype after Merktide.
Okay.
So
I missed that.
Yeah, so many people are trying like Elesnor and to some extent Atraxa, and 4-color is just a deck that people like to play for some weird reason, because the deck is
infinite clicks to
no, it's just so boring and so inconsistent. But when it does its thing, it's impressive. But yeah, like in general, Blood Moon has been a fairly good main deck card, I think, recently, due to Elementals and also Amulet that we are gonna get to later on. And some people rightfully, I think, said that you can't afford to have your main deck bad in the mirror. I think it was Dota who said that. And I thought about it, and I was like, yeah, that's true. So my first instinct was, okay, so I should cut bad cards from my deck, or bad cards from the mirror, from the main deck. And then I thought about it, and I don't think that's actually the case. I think Merktide is a deck that between cantrips and shredders, mostly shredders and channelers, is very good at turning your worst card in the hand into something better. So having one or two cards in your deck that are more or less blanks against any given deck is not that big of a deal, because you can just filter them away. The real
away or see them in with express filtration.
Yeah, exactly. Like you can get rid of them in some form or fashion. What is actually important is how good your best cards are, because you can't use Shredder to make your best card better. If that makes sense, because you will just always connive you will never connive your best card away, because that doesn't make sense. You will connive the worst card in your hand, or a land you don't need. So in general, worst card in your hand. So what actually matters is how high the density of good cards in the matchup are in your deck. So, for example, this is the example I used on Discord. I think I'd much rather have a deck in the mirror that has 3 Merktide Regents, which is probably the most important card in the mirror, and 2 Blood Moons, rather than playing 2 Merktide Regents and 0 Blood Moons. Even though you are, like, if you want to count net good cards in your deck, the 2-0 setup has 2 good cards, and the 3-2 setup has 3-2, so 1 good card, like, if you want to count it that way. So basically, I'm not opposed to running Blood Moon's main deck, but I do think that Merktide is very important. Merktide Regent as a card is very important for the archetype. And especially such high impact 1 or 2 as Moon is just so good in the matchups where it's good. And it can randomly be good in matchups when it's not supposed to be good even. So yeah, Merktide still the best deck, I think, by fairly, maybe not wide margin, but convincing margin. And I still think that even though creativity surpassed Hammer, I think if you are good at playing Hammer, you should just keep playing Hammer, because it's slightly favored against Merktide. I think still, at least Merktide's sideboard is like super hateful. And I think you can get it like with good sideboard and proper play, you can get it a slightly maybe above 50% against Hammer, or at least in that vicinity. Okay, moving on to creativity.
Finally.
Well, it's the best deck in the format. We'll spend the most time talking about it because it only makes sense.
Sure.
Especially since we haven't actually talked about Merktide for a while now. We're just always glancing over it and saying, yeah, it's the best deck, whatever. So, creativity. not much has changed. Some people have tried Atraxa as like
True.
a one-off or something. I don't know what consensus on Atraxa is. I don't know if one has been reached yet.
One was played, like there were people who played it as a fifth payoff spell, but I assume that if you play that many payoff spells, you probably should want to play like something like Persist, whatever. Like creativity decks are still very different from each other. Um, the only thing, like I was like even like double checking it, there's a movement that people play a bit less Timur and they go more to 5 color. Maybe because Leyline Binding is better. I can't feel exactly why it should be better now compared to like 3 months ago. But the movement is visible, and more 5 color creativities are at the top. Of course, you can like see persist or persist-less versions, how many creatures can be found, etc., etc. That's typical for this archetype. The core is why like the core is still the same, and white splash is more and more popular.
Yep. So I don't think that like Atraxa doesn't work with Persist, so I wouldn't go as far as say you want to play Persist if you have Atraxas.
True,
You'd
but you
rather
have
have like
also 4
Transmogrify, I
Archons,
guess.
yeah.
Yeah, like what I think Atraxa is valuable at is that there are matchups in which you can run out of Archons,
Fact.
like Solitude decks for the most part, and there are matchups in which you can get Necromancy. So I think that having some amount of other creatures in your deck is very important. I think Atraxa might be the best one. So that's definitely a valuable tool to have there. And regarding the 5 color splash or the Leyline Binding splash, yeah, I like apparent. I've never really felt that way. Maybe because I've been playing less actual copies of Merktide Regents in my decks recently, but I always had harder times dealing with like Timur than 5 color. But according to Iriel, our resident creativity expert, 5 color is better than 3 colors against Merktide. So I guess that's a big reason.
Yeah. The one last note I want to say that, like you said about creatures, like an alternative ways if something like the opponent is doing to stop Archons, and because the mill is again it came back from tier 7 to tier 3 or maybe a bit higher.
Yeah, it's in the B tier.
It sorry spoiler alert. Emrakul, the Ion Torn kind of come back, and you can see more and more of it in the creativity sideboard.
Yep. Next up, as I already said, we have Hammer. Nothing really changed with Hammer. Like
Really nothing.
yeah, last time we were talking about the meta game, I think we noticed a trend of mono white getting more and more popular, like instead of blue white. But recently, when I saw Hammer this, I think I saw more spell pierces once again. I think that was the case. I haven't been paying that much attention, to be honest.
Don't ask me why like this happens. Like I have no idea.
Yeah, but
Like,
basically, whether you play
it just
mono white
happens.
or blue white, Hammer is still a great choice, and there is not much to be said about it without deeper knowledge of Hammer that we don't have. Next up, Red Black Scam. Similar case to Hammer, really. A solid deck that's been A tier for the last, I don't know, 4 months, 5 months, whatever.
More even, in my opinion.
I don't think so. I think it broke out to as a like it broke out maybe at the end of summer, but it took a while for it to actually establish itself as a constant A tier resident, and I think
As a not fun deck to play that sometimes has their one grief, but real force in the format.
yeah.
The deck is just good. Like it also had really good. Like if we are talking about like the matchup difference in top tiers, Scam has a positive matchup versus Yavmod for sure, versus Hammer, versus I think that Creativity should beat Hammer, should beat Scam, and Scam should have maybe a slight underdog against Merktide,
I think
I
so, yeah.
assume, but it's close. Overall,
Yeah.
it's a really good deck. So
Yeah, Scam really benefited from people turning from Merktide towards those bridge decks because
that's
the
for
card
sure.
Merktide Regent is actually what beats Scam usually.
And the card Doughty Voidwalker is really good versus Underwood Bridge because
Yeah, and
you
it's
can't.
just okay against Merktide. Okay, and then we have Yawgmoth, which is a deck that was kind of balancing on the edge of A and B for about as long as Scam has been consensus A tier deck. And we've had a month last year when Yawgmoth was the only S tier deck on our list. It was like
That's
1
true.
month of Yawgmoth dominance. And I think that's, yeah, I don't think that Scam would have been A tier deck with Yawgmoth being the best deck. Like, I don't think, or the other way around. I don't think that Yawgmoth would be the best deck in the format or the best performing deck in the format while Scam is popular. So yeah, we can trace back rising popularity of Scam to roughly this time period, which was like, once again, 4 or 5 months ago, something like that. So yeah, nothing really changed in Yawgmoth 2. Like, people have been playing way more endurances these days, which is very smart.
Yeah, speaking of dominance, I wanted to say that our writer Zerk, Wojtek Kowalczuk, however you want to call him, like had super great results with Yavmod. Like it was like out of his last 6 bigger events he played, including an ICQ or Modern Challenge, like he had top dated all of them and won 2 probably. So it's just insane. And the changes he made in the deck list, like no Geralt Messengers and more Hapatras, more endurances to combat Merktide better, especially with the rise of DRC. Like the rise of DRC was a result of the rise of Underworld Bridge. Now we see the end of this trend, I would say.
Yeah.
We don't see that many bridges
Twinless
anymore.
Twin top 8 the Mana Traders event this weekend. And he's a big Darcy proponent, and he only played 1 at this event. So I think that points out to, like, he also was brainwashed by Mango on Mango's podcast because like Mango was the first person who played the Blood Moon list, and Mango hates Darcy. Like, he just boards out Darcy in almost every matchup. And then Max came to Mango's podcast because Javier and Anthony Lee, which are regular Mango's co-hosts, were playing at the Pro Tour. So Mango had a free time slot. He invited Max. They talked about Merktide for like over an hour. If you are playing Merktide and you want to hear some quality discussion on the topic, I recommend giving it a listen. There will be a link in the description below, and the podcast is called, I think, Competitive Magic with the Carnies. I think that's the name of the podcast. So
Cool name.
Yep. And Max was really high on Channeler moving into the episode, and then like Mango was like, no, I don't like this card. I always sideboard it out. I'd rather have like Serum Visions and stuff. And the Max was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Mango cut those 2 Serum Visions from his deck for 2 Channelers, of course. So kind of going back on that, like, I think that if you expect Merktide to be really popular, Channeler is not a good card in the mirror. Like, it's not bad, but it's also not good. And once again, I think mirror is more about having those good cards than how many bad cards you have. So I'd rather try to have an extra Merktide Regent in my deck if I'm playing a large tournament now. Or another card that Mango kind of brought or put on the map again, which not convincingly, concurrently, I guess, was a card that was first introduced to the archetype by Max in the sideboard like few months ago is Seasoned Pyromancer. I think Max was the first person who really played Pyromancer in the sideboard of Murktide, at least on like large scale model tournaments. And it's a card that's quite good in the mirror. Because like if you don't get run over, if you get run over early on, it's obviously terrible anyways, but then everything is terrible. But later on, if you counter Pyromancer, you just get tokens. And if you can merely consider, discard it to connive, whatever, and then you just get those tokens. And 1/1s are, it's insane how good 1/1s are so often on so many boards, especially if people don't board out their like Ragavans from their deck in the mirror, and you just have 2 1/1s, and this Ragavan can never attack again. So yeah, some cool evolutions.
Jędrek, but we were talking about Yavmod, not Murktide, not again,
Yes.
please. So let's come back to Yavmod. Like you had your time with Murktide.
There are no podcasts about Yagmoth, so
Kinda true. So these two big differences. So playing more endurances and zero Geralt Messenger and 1 Hapatra is like proves that it's good. Also, Xex is a great player, so
for
maybe
sure.
that's the reason why Yavmod is so high. Who knows? Still, really good deck.
Yep.
If you are familiar with it, just go for it and don't be scared about scam players or whatever.
Okay. Shall we go back to Steam Vents and Dragon's Age Channeler with B tier?
No. OMG. That's true.
The first we have how many? 9 decks? 9 decks in the B tier. Starting off, we have No Bad Cards Breach or Fair Breach, however you want to call it. I really dislike the word fair in Magic in general. Mid-range Breach, Value Breach, whatever. Then we have Domain Rhinos, Living End, 8 Blast, Elementals, Prowess, both Jeskai and Izzet together. And saying Izzet just made me wanna barf. So blue-red. Amulet, Blue-White Control, and Mill. Coming back somewhat strong with the addition of Jace Perfected Mind. Talk about it later on. So starting with Steam Vents and Dragon's Age Channeler. I don't have much to say. I said everything I wanted to say when we are talking about Murktide. I just think
so cool.
I just think you'd rather play 8/8s than draw a bunch of cards, especially with how format looks like right now. If you look at the top tier of the format and you think about, well, would I rather have Murktide Regent or Underworld Breach against those decks? In the mirror, you'd rather have Murktide. Against Creativity, you'd rather have Murktide. Against Hammer, for the most part, you'd rather have Murktide too, but it's close, depending on the situation. Against Red Black, you'd rather have Murktide. And against Yawgmoth, usually you'd rather have Murktide too. But it's also like sorta close, like Breach is better against Greased and Murktide is better against Endurance. But still, I think in general, it's just better to play this stupid 2-mana 8/8. Again, there are some decks that are coming up in the metagame, like for example 8 Blast. Sucks against an 8/8. Like I think Mango is once again a person that don't really like Breach in this deck. And he was posting some screenshots on Twitter of like, okay, I'm playing the 8 Blast decks and my opponent have Breach and drew like 3 cards, but instead of killing me with 8/8. There are decks like Mill that you'd rather kill. There are decks like, I don't know, Rhinos, Prowess.
Basically anything without lane binding. That's just
Yeah, kinda, but also not kinda. But yeah, in conclusion, killing your opponent is better than drawing a bunch of cards.
Yeah, like I like see this meme, like you can draw 25 or win the game. Like Breach players are the ones who keep drawing cards for.
Yeah, okay. One last, I guess, kinda off topic thing I want to say is that Merktide broke me. Merktide broken me as a person and as a Magic player. I've been playing Pauper recently. A fair amount of Pauper. We have a large scene in Poznań, like almost over 20 people coming to play Paper Pauper every week, which is a ridiculous amount of players in like your local 6 p.m. tournament in Poznań. And obviously I jumped right into the format with my favorite archetype, which is Teachings. And with Phyrexia...
Blue, black, no Wincons.
Blue, black, no Wincons. And with Phyrexia, you've got this new card, 2 mana, draw a card, opponent gets poison counter. And I was playing like 2 of them, and then I have Devious Cover-Ups to loop them back into my deck, trying to kill my opponent this way. But nobody wanted to... Like, those people didn't really know what I'm doing, so they didn't want to scoop. Even if I had 7 cards in hand, they had 0. And I had like 20-something life. Which is, of course, their right. But what I'm talking about is that back in the day, I would love every second of it. And nowadays, I was like, okay, I have 7, you have 0. Are we there yet? Are we done? I don't want to loop it like for the next half an hour. It's just not fun anymore. So I've been broken. And then I came back after playing 3 rounds. I dropped because I didn't really want to play another round of this deck.
Please tell me that you were such a champ and was 3-0.
No, I was 1 and 2.
Okay.
And I bought Snuffouts. I only have 2. Other 2 are in the mail. And I have 2 mental notes to pair with those 2 Snuffouts. Also 2 in the mail. This card is obnoxious. It costs 4 euros. And nobody has a playset. You have to buy it from like 4 different people. It's so annoying. So I will start playing some 5/5s for 1 mana in Pauper, just to have the same Merktide feel I have in Modern. So yeah, Merktide has broken me. All I love right now is drawing cards for cheap and then playing undercosted threats. That's what I love in Magic now. Sorry, Esper Control fans. I'm not one of you anymore. Oh, I guess if that's a good deck, I would probably play it still. It's not no Wincons Teachings. Killing with Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, or Jade's Zaman Sculptor is still a viable win condition, in my opinion. I've been broken. That's all I wanted to say on the topic. And we can talk about Rhinos, I guess, which are the next deck on our list. Because I see Sodek just losing any interest whatsoever in what I'm talking about.
I like short, cool stories, but this was a bit too long for me to keep it.
But it was cool, right? Was it cool?
Kinda like 6 out of 10 cool.
Yes. Okay. We have Domain Rhinos, which is, as always, both 5 and 4 color Rhinos. If you have Leyline Binding in your deck, you are in this category, basically. And Crushing Force. I don't have much to say about this deck.
The only thing I want to say is that people are toying more and more with what's essential for the deck, because since the Modern Horizons 2 and Shard's Agent print, Force of Negation was like a staple that you just can't submit a Cascade list without Force of Negation. I saw some deck lists without Force of Negation at all, and with more endurances as an answer to the Rise of Merktide and like our DLC decks, Underworld Breach, etc. I don't know if it's good anymore, because Force of Negation is kind of good versus Creativity. It's okay versus Hammer, although post-stability you have many other good cards to cover this matchup. So maybe that's the future. Maybe the future of cutting Force of Negation and adding more fair cards. I know you don't like this word, but endurance kind of fits here. Maybe that's the future of the archetype. And as like Rhinos is my like 4th deck of choice in Modern, but like I want to be in touch with the archetype, and I kind of like the change.
I would be very cautious of having no forces in my 75. I can definitely see it being better as a sideboard card, but I think there's a large subset of decks against which you really need force or like creativity, like Living End,
Although,
like any deck that.
post
Come
sideboard,
again.
it's much worse because they have so many ways to protect your creativity with force. So
They have them, but also you are killing them with 4/4, so they don't have that much time to set up.
that's true. That's true.
So, okay,
Maybe.
going from
So-
one Cascade deck to another.
Yeah, Rhinos
Okay.
are good, and Living End is a bit less good according to the data. Living End hasn't changed at all since our last and like many others. Big by quite quarterly. Hard to say.
This guy looks like
Uh,
Joe Biden. I just
I don't.
realized.
I don't see it.
The mental
maybe,
note guy looks like Joe Biden a bit.
maybe he is. I don't think so. Like it looks like an average guy.
Because from this perspective, I didn't see the mustache. Mustache is killing the Joe Biden vibe for me. But yeah,
Too
okay.
bad.
Let's
Uh,
continue about
Long
Living
story
End.
short, Living End hasn't changed that much. Uh, I was even trying to find something that to say here, but it's not happening. Like they are all the same sideboard cards, all the same main deck cards. Like you see some lists playing Brazen Borrower, some lists don't. Some like most of the lists are playing for Living Ends right now, mostly because Mercury is at the top and creative with spell pieces can be a ref one if you happen to draw too many Living Ends. So that's the only trend I can say, but that's it. Like the deck is it's okay. It's a fine deck, but also has some like it has two problems. The first one is Merktide being at the top, and the game post sideboard against Merktide is like deciding 4 hopes and free praise, and that's the plan. And the second problem is scam, and I don't feel it's salvageable. Like you can have this uh, brute force draws with subtleties to attack either turn 1 elemental or turn 2 Doughty Voidwalker and go for fast turn 3 living end and hope that's enough. And that that's it's not happening that often, and you will lose quite often. And
Yeah.
there are like a lot of other graveyard hate cards that can just punish you for going that fast.
One thing I would like to note is we are only talking about Modo as usual, but I think Living End is still a deck that you have to be ready to face in paper. Like we're playing a large tournament. Many people will come with their only deck of choice, and for many people it's still Living End because the deck is very proactive and very strong. That hasn't changed. What changes basically is metagame positioning. And if you only have one deck and you can't borrow another deck or buy another deck, you don't care about metagame positioning because you will play what you have. So I think that it's been pretty common for me in the last few large paper tournaments that I was just walking around after I was done with my round and I saw so much Living End in compared to Modo. So just keep that in mind. It's not a testimony to Living End being strong or anything. Just keep in mind that if you're playing a large scale paper tournament, at least in Europe, I don't know if it's the same on different continents, but I would be ready for Living End. Maybe if you have some doubts about what your 15th sideboard card could be, just make it another Flusterstorm or Tormod Script or Chalice of the Void, whatever. Okay, moving on to the deck that, first of all, is something that we actually will talk about because it's new and interesting. And the other thing is that it's 9th on our list, and I really wanted it to be 8th because it's 8 Blast. So for those of you who don't know what 8 Blast is, it's basically a port of Pauper Burn to Modern. You are playing some light, maybe not light, like medium artifact theme in your deck to support cards like Shrapnel Blast and Galvanic Blast. You're playing Voldaren Epicure, you're playing Ragavan, of course. and you have some small Urza Saga toolbox to like bolster your overall power level. It's basically a bit of a port of a Pauper Burn deck, and also an attempt to make Burn into an archetype that's worthy of 2023 Modern. Because playing a bunch of Fritzbolt and Square the Critics is not very good these days. And frankly, it hasn't been in a long time. But dealing 5 damage with 1 card is very impressive. It gives you so much reach. Like, if you draw 2 Shrapnel Blasts, it's half of their life total. Plus
That's
some
true.
Fetchlands and Shocklands on their part. Like, you will win a large percentage of games in which you will resolve 2 Shrapnel Blasts. It's a very similar premise to why Zoo is good. Because
Tribal Flames.
Rival Flames deals 5 damage. So
I also want to say that like these cards, like the deck kind of act like the burn, but the cards can act in a different way. They are not super centered in going very proactive and go straight to the face.
they
You
are
can
not as
easily
one-dimensional.
play-
Yeah.
Yeah, you can easily play a very long game, and card advantage engine in this deck is phenomenal because that's an Urza Saga deck. You have experimental synthesizer that gives you cards, gives you a value guy later on. That's and like the deck also produces artifacts somewhat freely, and like there's no like there isn't the biggest problem to get an artifact for Shrapnel Blast. You don't have to play a real card to get it.
Yeah.
Like,
And you don't have to play like tapped artifact land to have your count being high enough or something terrible like that, or Darkly Straddle in your mono red deck.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's a very interesting
really good
deck.
deck. Yeah, really good deck, and I like another twist on Ragavan DRC deck that like we saw counters of them already, and
Yeah.
somewhat like this check how to say it like gee. Próba czasu, zapomniałem.
Yeah, you are basically now I forgot as well. You are
That's really
basically passing the test of time.
Yeah,
With this version of the deck.
And I like once it happened, I can see more and more players going this route. So
And it's basically the successful attempt of integrating MH2 1-drops into Burn, because people tried playing like some amount of Ragavan, some amount of Channelers in regular Burn. And this is actually a way of doing so. That's also good. So that's very interesting. Okay, moving on, we have Elementals, which is... Back in the day, I was a bit more strict with how I classify different Elementals decks as Elementals or for color control. I've had a lot of mishaps today with editing our data, but also like basically all Elementals decks in this group have Risen Reef in it. Every deck without Risen Reef is the for color control deck. So you have both like Flamekin, Harbinger, Thunderkin, Awakener decks. Thunderkin, Awakener. The reanimating elemental, you know which one I'm talking about,
Yeah,
the one to haste. You have those decks. You have just 4-color Omnath Risen Reef decks. You have some decks like Blink. There was like a Blink deck with Eladamri's Call and Eleshnorn, which is another development in the archetype. People have been trying one copy of Eleshnorn to grab with their Eladamri's Call, or sometimes even without Eladamri's Call in their deck at all. And Eleshnorn is a card that is somewhat impressive because it has 7 toughness, so you can't kill it with Unholy Heat. Because of its static ability that impacts your opponent.
I have really cool thing.
Yeah.
It's 7 and you 4 because for years 4 toughness was the key to surpass Lightning Bolt.
Yeah, more
Then
or
you
less.
have to
7
have
is a new
7.
4. 7 is a new 4. You are very proud of yourself. So
Good joke. Yeah.
yeah, it was pretty good. It was pretty good. As you can see, I'm laughing so hard. So yeah, like you can't kill it with Unholy Heat. Because of its static, you can't kill it with Solitude or Leyline Binding. So it's surprisingly immune to removal as a creature that doesn't have hexproof or protection or anything like that. And it just makes your things go bananas. You can exile 2 things with Binding. You can exile 2 things with Solitude. You can play win their board with Fury, even more so than usual. So yeah, I think that it was like, once again, people are drawn to these decks as well for some reason that is kind of eluding me. But people like playing with 4-color decks, and anytime you have a new printing, especially when you have 12 different versions you can of the card you can choose, whichever one you like the most. People will just play those decks. I think that elementals are still an inherently flawed deck. They are not very consistent. If you are playing more than 60 cards, which most of those decks are, you will draw your good cards less often, yada yada yada. But it's still like a deck that is capable of doing powerful things. Omnath is just a powerful magic card. And if like the meta game you are facing is not very heavy on like Blood Moons, for example, you can cheese a lot of people with Cavern of Souls into Omnath, which I complained about many times, and I will many times to come. Not much else to add about elementals.
I have zero opinions about it. Like
Okay.
Even like I never encountered in like 3 months. Whatever.
Okay.
Like maybe once in LGS. That's it.
Do you have opinions on prowess?
Yes, it's a really good deck in my opinion. And,
Okay, I think it's pretty good as well.
It should be higher in my opinion. Like this is the best take on, again, fair aggressive deck. The difference between fair and unfair is harder to catch. But similar to 8 Blast, it's a mix of being aggressive and being able to kill on turn 3, and having tools to grind. Like after all, it's an expressive iteration deck, so it's good to watch. Like we were talking about prowess in terms of like the rise of the deck, of its popularity, and that some versions of prowess play Underworld Breach, some do not. And
I think all of them play Underworld Breach these days. I think every single one that I looked through in this data dam, it was like almost 20 of them. I think every single one played at least one Underworld Breach.
And I assume that they also played Mutagenic Growths, because like this card.
Most of them. I think there were some without, but very, very few of them.
I really like Mutagenic Growth in prowess, exactly because it protects your guys from Lightning Bolt, and later on you just a Splinter Twin situation when you just go Underworld Breach, play a bunch of Mutagenic Growths.
It's basically Force of Will.
That's true.
Against Lightning
like
Bolt.
Mental Misstep even.
It's Force
Probably
of Will.
Better. Why?
Because I said so. Even though Mental Missteps make much more sense.
Yeah, because 1 mana, Pyrexian spell, protects your 1-drop from other 1-drop, etc. Okay, whatever.
But what if your opponent uses Ren 6 to kill your 1-drop?
What 1-drop? Soulscar Mage? Monastery Swift Spear? Your DLC that's
Channeler.
always free?
You play Channeler and your opponent plays Ren 6, and then you use Mental Misstep to win the game. Is it Force of Will or is it Mental Misstep?
It's still closer to Misstep, but let's move on. Again, good deck. Personally, like Prowess is on my short list of decks that I could play in Modern. Sadly, the list is long enough that I don't want to build yet another deck to just keep it in my shelf and never touch them. Sadly,
yeah, it's not on mine, but I think if I was to make a list, it would be higher than on Sodek's list, because my list is one deck, which is Merktide, and then I guess you have the Breach decks and Creativity, like both Creativity and like, well, if I couldn't play Merktide for some reason, I would probably just start playing Creativity or Hammer. or I would just default myself to playing blue white, and after 2 tournaments of losing miserably because blue white is just not very good, I would switch to creativity or hammer. But yeah, speaking of decks that were kinda considered good and then they fell off very quickly, shall we talk about Amulet?
Yes, let's go.
Yeah, because Amulet was super hyped with Michaels and Garden. So many people were like, OMG, you have to ban this deck. That's never true. Amulet is never good. Amulet is never a good deck. It's never a really good deck.
That's rude. That's really rude.
It's very powerful, but it's also like you are just folding to so many cards and you can't do anything about it. Like you can try to some extent, but you can't make your deck good against Blood Moon. You can't make your deck good against Dress Down. You can't make your deck good against Force of Vigor. Like you can make your deck so you can engineer situations in which those cards are not as good, but they will still be impactful very often. And like every color basically has a way to stop your deck. More or less.
Dredge doesn't.
But Dredge is also not on the list because it's super bad. So
That hurts me. Okay, I also would like to talk about how the development of the new Amulet lists like took place. I don't know if that's the best word to say that, but right after the Michaels and Gardens like got spoiled, like Amulet players were super excited that yeah, we should totally rebuild this deck because it's 12 amulets and like we should prioritize playing more lands, etc. And we saw versions without Dryad, without the Valakut package, just with like more amulets. And sure, like the deck got more turn 3 kills or even turn 2 kills by just using Primeval Titan. Yeah, that happened, but after all, like once Amulet players had to face, real problems in terms of opponents with
Blood Moon.
active cards.
Force of Vigor.
Unholy hit, whatever. It turns out that it's probably not the best approach. Like I still like looking at the results, I feel that Amulet players realized that Dryad was probably a good idea. But we can still see some versions without. But I even saw the tweet of Edgar Magayesh that like saying that Amulet
Great pronunciation.
Thanks. That Amulet is not tier 1 and that it's not the best idea to play this deck.
Yeah, I saw this tweet as well. Like he even go as far and said that he won't be working on a deck for the foreseeable future because it's just, as I said, fundamentally flawed in a way that can be fixed really. And for the most part, I missed most of the Amulet metagame for the first like 2 weeks of Phyrexia Modern because I was focused on different things. But the biggest joy I've had was listening to Canister complaining about every single Amulet list he saw because Canister is fucked up. He just wants to have 4 Cavern of Souls in every single version of Amulet because otherwise he can't win against Merc, right? It's like, oh, you don't have any Cavern of Souls in the main deck. I have 4 Azusas. Oh, smooth brain. Saying stuff like that. And then he showed up to our weekly Modern with his version of the deck with Cavern of Souls, and then I beat them anyways because, well,
easy.
because it's just so easy to beat Canister. He's such a fish. But yeah, like, Amulet is just not very good, and I think it's showing that even the person who was first in the Mana Traders event after Swiss was Dom Harvey. Obviously from my favorite podcast, Dominarius Judgment. And Dom is a person who used to play a lot of Amulet as well. And you know what deck did he play in this tournament?
Merktide?
Scam. So, no Amulet.
True.
And
like,
I think I think he definitely got a lot of surprise factor because he's somewhat known and he always played Amulet. So people weren't prepared for him going turn 1 Ragavan against them. But still.
Despite open deck list, yeah.
Oh, it was open deck list.
Probably, I assume.
Yeah, it was open deck list. I think it was open deck list, yes. So I'm talking nonsense. That's what
I still weren't prepared, yeah. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, moving on.
I like the last thing about Amulet. It's a really good deck to kill, to Goldfish turn 3 win, but sadly killing the opponent on turn 3 consistently is not good enough in the format. Sadly, because like I would like this type of decks to be a bit better. The answers are a bit too good. Maybe you should ban something. Who knows?
Oh, maybe you should just play good decks and not shit piles that are glass cannony and only can kill your opponent if they have absolutely nothing. Okay, then we have blue-white. Yon, nothing to say about blue-white. It's still a deck that if you are not Waffo, you just don't play blue-white. It's just not a very good deck. You can play broken cards in this format. Ragavan, Expressive Iteration, Consider, all those broken cards. Just
Consider can be played in blue-white. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. Like you can play cantrips. Play cantrips, dude. Like just if you are playing those older formats and you have those card selection spells available, just play them. They are making your deck so much better, so much more consistent. And you don't have to play a deck which is like 25 lands or whatever and has no library manipulation. And if you don't draw your good cards, you are dead. You're basically playing a blue-white Jund deck that you have to draw the right exact amount of lands. And if you don't, you are screwed. If you draw too many, you are screwed as well. Just don't play those decks. Play Merktide. Please play Merktide. Or I don't know, some other deck that actually has velocity of any kind. Okay. And then we have deck that we kind of can talk about for a while, which is Mill. Sodek called. I was a Jace Perfected Mind skeptic. Sodek said, no, it will be good, yada yada yada, and it's kind of good. Like the vast majority of Mill lists that are winning have those 4 Jaces in the deck. I think it still kind of compounds the same problems of your deck is bad against Dispute and you have another card that's bad against Dispute. But what's good is that people stopped playing those fucking main deck Surgical Extractions and they actually have a good card in their deck.
Sadly, I have bad news for you because I see some Surgical Extractions still. Not that as many.
Yeah, but they kind of moved it to the sideboard or cut some amount of them. I think Demonic Tutor said 0 in the main deck.
But I see all the preliminary lists have 3. They don't play stuff like Cryptic Incursion.
Okay. Another card that's not very good at furthering your plan, right?
That's the start. That's a good thing. I also feel that like Mill had its moment when what Mill was trying to do was somewhat okay versus the metagame. Like it attacked it from a bit different angle. There were not any hate cards, but once people added like one Emrakul to the sideboard, like the whole Mill thing stopped.
Oh, yeah, and Amulet got less popular after a few weeks.
Like Mill was the attack was the tool to attack the Amulet meta because right after the Mycosynth Gardens became a thing. Like everyone were on Amulet and Mill was just destroying them.
And that's why I saw tutors succeeding with this list of Mill that has no Surgical Extraction in the main deck. And I just can't see how Mill is good game 1 against Amulet with no Surgical Extraction. I can't see it. Because Amulet will be just too fast. I think.
Kinda yes, but like I also feel that Tasha's Hideous Laughter is surprisingly good. Like, sure, you have.
Yeah, but it's turn 3. If you're on the draw, you don't have turn 3. Like, I guess Mill is good because you will just randomly mill their Hasteland often enough to kill them in time.
That's thing around the lock active very fast is a thing.
Yeah,
too.
of course. Like it's probably the combination of like milling their their haste land, and then also having Drown in the Lock to kill their Titan, and then they're just not fast enough. I guess so.
And
That
you
makes
play
some sense.
Ancestral after all, so
Yeah,
if you
that
play
makes some
Ancestral,
sense. Okay, I can
then
see that because obviously if you
can be
have
good.
main dex surgical, it's much better. Yeah, sure. Not much to say about mill.
It's still bad, but
Yeah, it's still.
if you like it, it's not this exact moment to play this deck.
If you want to play
It was-
Burn, just play 8 Blast. Don't play Mill. Don't play actual Burn. That we'll go get to very soon. Just play 8 Blast. Okay.
And if you wanted to play middle, like your chance was 3 weeks ago.
Yes.
Sorry,
You missed
it's
it.
not this. Yeah.
Come back in 4 months.
Yeah.
Maybe we will get, I don't know, a milling Gandalf in Lord of the Rings or something.
Oh, that would be cool. That would be super cool. Why Gandalf exactly?
I was kind of thinking about a character from Lotr that can mill people. Grima maybe, because we saw some leaks of Gollum and Gollum didn't mill. And Gollum was another card that's like in this blue-blackish area that can mill people.
We saw Gollum card? What?
You look at it later on. Come on! Sodek, you look at it. It was like torn in half and it didn't have mana cost, so we don't know how much mana does it cost.
Whatever. Okay, let's go through C section and
Okay, C-tier has only 2 decks. We kind of already talked about because we have 3-color Rhinos and Burn.
And that's the thing I have to say. 3-color Rhinos are for sure better than some of the decks from B tier. So I have no idea how Rhinos came in this position. It's a mistake in the matrix, whatever. And
No, it's just
I just don't
it's
know.
just the fact that we are separating domain Rhinos from 3-color Rhinos, and because our
not
tier
enough
list,
results, yeah.
because our tier list works in a way that both includes the win rate and the popularity. The popularity of 3-color Rhinos is low enough to drag it like under, probably. I don't know how high the win rate of those Rhino decks is. Yeah, I guess it's actually below average on win rate as well, and it's actually above average on presence. So yeah, I guess I was just wrong. It just didn't have very good 6 weeks. It's like
Interesting, really interesting, because I remember the moment when like Teamwork Rhinos were superior compared to Domain. For instance, if you expect a lot of scam, Teamwork Rhinos are a bit better because you are not so soft to Blood Moon. They can play. So interesting, and but you know the results don't lie, and the Rhinos are here for a reason. But still,
I guess
it's a better position than Bern, and Bern being
Yeah.
on the list at all is
I think
surprising.
I think Timur versus Domain Rhinos is the similar idea that 3-color creativity to Leyline Binding creativity. You just think that Leyline Binding is good, and then you play it, and that's it basically. There are obviously some other things that are connected to this additional color, but it's mostly Leyline Binding being good or not. And then we have Burn, and once again, if you want to play Burn, you have 2 better options: Mill and 8 Blast. It's all the same deck.
Whoa, Neil being a better.
Well, Mill
opponent.
is of course Mill is blue Burn. Like it's been known for ages, Sonic. If you don't know it, they are so much behind the curve.
Why don't you recommend Prowess?
Well, it's a bit different deck. It's like saying Prowess is probably closer to Merktide than Burn. I think.
Maybe, who knows?
Or definitely to
Still-
Fair Breach. Prowess is way closer to Fair Breach than it is to Burn. Ha!
Okay, I can accept that.
Yes. Okay.
Still, Burn, do not touch. This deck is just
Not good.
underpowered compared to everything else. Yeah, and like if you don't believe us, like just believe to the results of bigger tournaments when they they show the results. For instance, I remember it was from SCG or
No, it was from Trieste. Burn had like 38% win rate against meta decks, or 33.
like
It was like
really bad.
woefully low. Just don't play
So-
Burn unless you have no other option. And if you don't have other option than playing Burn, consider, I don't know, touching grass for a weekend or something. I don't know. Just playing Burn is not a very good idea, I think. Unless you have a
What
lot
type
of
of-
joy in casting Eidolon of Great Level. If that's your
Like-
jam, then sure. But
What's the expected metagame had to be to make Burn?
there is no such metagame. It's just you are playing Burn because you like it, or you don't play anything else. Like, well, I guess Creativity and Elementals are decks that are not very good against Burn. So,
There's a reason, maybe.
but then you are getting paired against Merktide and you lose. Okay, I think that's it.
Yes.
Okay, so as always, thanks for watching us up to this point. Any link you need is in the description. There will be a link to our website, our Twitters, Twitch streams, everything, and the Competitive Magic with Carney's podcast that I mentioned at the very beginning of this episode. And yeah, quick TLDR if you haven't watched the whole video. Here is our bi-quarterly tier list for February 28th of 2023. A tier, Merktide, Creativity, Hammer, Red Black Scam, Yawgmoth. B tier, No Bad Cards Breach, Domain Rhinos, Living End, 8 Blast, Elementals, Prowess, Amulet, Blue-White, Mill. And C tier, 3-color Rhinos and Burn. Once again, thanks so much for watching our content. Take care, and we'll see you when we see you. Bye-bye.
See ya.